The Egghead arc revealed that Luffy not only inherited Joyboy's devil fruit, but that Luffy physically looks exactly like Joyboy. Yet Luffy is not the only D-Clan member described like this. In the next arc, it is revealed that Rocksteady Sebek apparently also looked exactly like Davy D. Jones, another figure who likely lived during the Void Century, where even Imu mistook Sebek for his old enemy. By extension, this also means that Blackbeard would also look like Jones, where he as Sebek's son looks almost exactly like his father. In another scene in the final saga, it is revealed that Nefertari D. Lily, the Queen of Alabasta during the Void Century, was almost an exact double of Vivi, who herself has now also been revealed to be a D-Clan member. With these examples, this is now becoming more than just a coincidence, where there are now 4 confirmed D-Clan members in the story, who physically look exactly like people who lived during the Void Century. This should genuinely be impossible, where even if these characters are related, they are separated by literally hundreds of years worth of time. Yet, this could well be the answer we're looking for, where what Vegapunk was about to say is something the world government is absolutely terrified of. During the events of God Valley, Imu is absolutely obsessed with purging Davy D. Jones's bloodline. Even though some of the most notorious pirates in history were also on this island, Imu referred to them as mere obstacles, but that he by any means necessary had to eradicate the Davy blood. Sebek also managed to find out why, where it is revealed that what Imu is afraid of is Davy D. Jones literally coming back to the world through his descendants. Yet, not only Davy Jones, but Imu is also afraid of this happening with Joyboy. We also in the present timeline see that Imu's worst fears have come true, where he literally views Luffy as Joyboy reborn. I think this may well be the greater truth about the D-Clan that Vegapunk was about to reveal. It could be that all of the current day D-Clan members are versions of people who lived during the Void Century. But I also think that this may be a twist the story has been setting up all the way back since Marineford. There is actually one character in One Piece who knew everything about the D-Clan, outside Vegapunk, the world government, or even the Roger pirates. This character was Whitebeard. During his last meeting with Roger, Whitebeard asked him what the D actually meant, and Roger promised to tell Whitebeard everything. I think Whitebeard during the Marineford arc may have honestly spoiled the entire D-Clan mystery right before he died. There's a moment in the Summit War where Luffy for the first time revealed to everyone that he's a Conqueror's Haki user, but the character who was by far the most interested in this reveal was actually Whitebeard. Before this point, Whitebeard had already been keen on Luffy, because he was Ace's brother, and because he wore Shanks' hat, but Luffy using his Conqueror's Haki is what truly piqued Whitebeard's interest. This is the moment Whitebeard connected Luffy to the Will of D, where Luffy's Conqueror's Awakening made Whitebeard think that Luffy has to be one of the successors of the Will of D, destined to lead the future era. Whitebeard thought that this was so important that he actually commanded all his men to support Luffy with everything they had. For context, the Whitebeard pirates' mission here was still to save Ace, but Luffy up to this point was just helping them out, where he was still a glorified rookie amidst much stronger pirates. Whitebeard even literally has a scene where he tells Luffy to buzz off and to not get in their way. Luffy's Conqueror's Awakening was however the thing that made Whitebeard completely change his tune. In Whitebeard's mind, this now went even beyond just rescuing Ace, where he also wanted Luffy to survive, just so that he could fulfill the Will of D. But, very interestingly, Luffy isn't the only D-Clan member Whitebeard in this arc talks about in this way. For a quick pause, because you watched the video this far, I think you should subscribe. I'm currently maintaining a pretty good upload streak, so by subscribing, your feed should basically get a lot of new fresh One Piece content like this. In the scene right before his death, Whitebeard talks about the succession of 3 D-Clan members other than Luffy. These are Roger, Blackbeard, and Ace. Whitebeard says that Roger's will has been passed on, and that this same thing will happen to Ace's will, but he also denies the idea that Blackbeard is the one who inherited Roger's will. Whitebeard also adds that he isn't talking about mere bloodlines, where the will he's talking about is something that transcends even them and cannot be extinguished. For many years, my take was that what Whitebeard was talking about here was that there would unavoidably always be people who would carry the ideals and desires of those who came before. This is something we see frequently in One Piece, where inherited will could even apply to someone like Bartolomeo, who turned his life over just to emulate Luffy, even though Barto is neither Luffy's relative or even a D-Clan member. It has however now been over 500 chapters since Marineford, and with all the information the story has revealed in this time, I think it's very possible that there is something even more going on with the inherited will of the D-Clan. While I still think that the part about the D-Clan members carrying the wills and desires of those who came before is still true, the D-Clan could also be carrying something actually physical from the Void Century. Years before Luffy's Nika Devil Fruit reveal in Wano, we were actually introduced to another One Piece character who was the successor of someone who had lived during the Void Century, which was Shirahoshi. Shirahoshi was revealed as the reborn mermaid princess of the Void Century, otherwise known as Ancient Weapon Poseidon. Very interestingly, with both Luffy and Shirahoshi, this rebirth was seemingly proven by them activating a dormant ability. With Shirahoshi, the Sea Kings were able to tell that she was Poseidon after she had demonstrated the ability to command them. With Luffy, even though they had already met during Zou, Shueisha only realized that Luffy was the new Joyboy after he awakened his Devil Fruit, which was seemingly something no one had managed to do since the Void Century. But very interestingly, this thing where the awakening of dormant power signals someone's destiny also happened in Marineford, where it wasn't Luffy being a D-Clan member, Ace's brother, Dragon's son, Garp's grandson, or even him carrying Shanks' hat that made Whitebeard convinced about Luffy, but it was him awakening his Conqueror's Haki. So, what could all of this mean in practice? Why is the current era full of characters who not only look exactly like figures from the Void Century, but also bear the same powers as them? I kind of already said this before in this video, but these D-Clan members could well be actual copies of people from the Void Century. But let me explain how this could work in the One Piece story. During Whole Cake Island, it was revealed that the One Piece world has a thing called the lineage factor, which is essentially the story's version of DNA. By manipulating the lineage factor, you can actually copy the traits and abilities of another person, where this is how someone like Vegapunk was able to do something like experiment on Kaido and replicate his Devil Fruit power, or how he was also able to later recreate the Warlords of the Sea as the Seraphim, but also to give the Seraphim traits of several different races. Yet, what Vegapunk also admits is that what he is able to do is only a shadow of what people were able to do in the Void Century. On top of carrying the wills and desires of people from the past, what the D-Clan could also be are carriers of a genetic code passed along for hundreds of years. Since the lineage factor is a real concept in One Piece, it could be that during the Void Century, there was someone who with either technology or a Devil Fruit power was able to manipulate the lineage factor of the original D-Clan members. We know that the people of the Void Century, where they had somehow seen the future and knew that the Great War would resume in 800 years. It could be that by perfectly manipulating the lineage factor of the founding D-Clan members, it was ensured that versions of great figures like Joyboy and Davy Jones would be reborn in the future, so that they could participate in the next Great War. It would essentially be a more supernatural version of how genetics work in real life, where sometimes people are born carrying traits that have not appeared in multiple generations. It could also be that Imo himself discovered that this was what the D-Clan was doing. It would explain why he's so obsessed with expunging certain D-Clan bloodlines, but also why he's so afraid of his former enemies somehow being reborn. Understandably, this is probably also something a lot of fans are very worried about, where the idea of not only Luffy, but all other D-Clan members also being reincarnations may very well not be something people want to see happen. But I do not actually think we're dealing with actual reincarnations here, not at least in the way you might think. Even though Imo literally sees characters like Luffy and Sebek as the same people who lived during the Void Century, I do not think this is where the story is actually going. When Emmet finally talks to Luffy at the end of Egghead, he realizes that despite all their similarities, Luffy is not Joyboy, but his own person called Monkey D. Luffy. This is essentially one of One Piece's core ideas, where no matter how you are born, lived experience trumps everything. All the way back in the pre-time skip, we learned that Ace was someone who started his life thinking that him carrying the blood of a demon defined everything about him, but as Garp later told him, what truly shaped Ace's life was not his birth, but his own experiences. This is something One Piece plays around with a lot, where the story is filled with examples of characters being born in seemingly life-defining circumstances, yet life still finds a way to subvert them. I think the most interesting recent example is actually Shanks, who is now revealed to have an identical twin brother. Despite Shanks and Shamrock being exact genetic doubles, they however couldn't be more different by the time of the current story, where the thing that actually defined them was that they were separated as infants and ended up living completely different lives. I think this is also what we're setting up with the D-Clan, and with all these Void Century figures seemingly resurfacing as characters we already know from the current story. Luffy and Blackbeard may very well be hundreds of years planned versions of characters like Joyboy and Davy Jones, but what this really means is that they've just inherited their attributes. This could essentially explain why characters like Whitebeard and Shueisha were more than anything interested in Luffy awakening these latent abilities, where these above everything else showed that he carried Joyboy's powers, even if Luffy at the end of the day was still just Luffy. Just like Emmett realized that Luffy was his own person, Whitebeard also seemingly thought the same thing, where even after Roger had told him of the D-Clan of old, Whitebeard saw the clan's current members as successors. I suppose this video's idea could also in a way explain why the D-Clan tend to live such checkered lives, on top of the fact that several of them lived their lives being hunted down by the world. If the D-Clan members have been carrying the traits of these great figures from the Void Century, it could explain why they are so daring and prone to taking risks, where it could quite literally be in their DNA. I still however have one thing I need to say about this idea, which is that even if this is somehow true, and the D-Clan members carry the lineage factor of those from the Void Century, they would not actually be perfect copies. We already know that even Luffy and Joyboy had their physical differences, where Joyboy seemingly had a much bigger body than Luffy. This also possibly goes for Davy Jones and Blackbeard, where Imu mistook Sebek for Jones. But we also know that Sebek and Teach have their own physical differences, where Blackbeard's body is much more similar to other buccaneers than it is to Sebek's. There is also the very interesting fact that we know that Blackbeard's body has something neither Sebek or Jones had, which is the ability to eat multiple devil fruits, where the Gorosei have confirmed that Blackbeard is literally the only person in history able to do this. But I also think I might have the answer for this mystery. If you're interested, you should click here to watch this video, where I go over Blackbeard's entire mystery and how Teach may have literally died in the moment when he took Whitebeard's devil fruit. Huge thanks to all my members for their bountiful plunder. I hope I managed to continue my upload streak with this video. Oh yeah, huge thanks to all who made it all the way to the end of this video.